you. Thanks for stopping by today. Today, I want to talk about a topic that I don't typically mention and talk about because I think it could be called probably 20 other things. But one of the names it goes by, which I'm sure you've all heard, is imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, we've all heard this term. What the heck is it? And how do we get out of it? And I want to share how to get rid of imposter syndrome once and for all. First of all, let's go into the root of this word, or these two words, imposter syndrome, to talk more about how this all came about anyway. So this actually became a term coined back in the late 70s from a paper written by two psychologists, Susan Imes and Pauline Clance, both psychologists, and they wrote a paper called The Imposter Phenomenon in High Achieving Women. So these two clinical psychologists put a name to these feelings of incompetence and everything that happens when we downplay success. Years later, I'm talking current times, there's now so much more to learn from this. In fact, there's a great book out there called The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women: Why Capable People Suffer from the Imposter Syndrome and How to Thrive in Spite of It. That is from Dr. Valerie Young, and I invite you to check it out sometime. But let's cover, first of all, what is imposter syndrome, why it is, and how it works. Bottom line is you don't need to be a woman to experience imposter syndrome. It can literally happen to anybody. However, because typically women might self-doubt themselves, it tends to relate, and most women can relate to this concept of thinking about things that they could do, but still don't feel like they're good enough or wanting to do something any different. Imposter syndrome typically feels like we're frauds, even though we might be literally geniuses or owning the work and doing it so well, getting accolades, praise. The outside world identifies us as the experts, and yet for whatever reason, our minds are like, dude, what are you doing? You don't know anything about this topic, or you're a fraud. You're a fraud. You shouldn't even be at Google. That would be my voice at Google, for example, potentially. So we all have imposter syndrome, and that was part of the premise of what this work was. In fact, there's ways to think about this that all of us have it to some extent, right? We have this armor to protect ourselves on at any time, for the most case. According to Dr. Gale, who was, I don't know who Dr. Gale is. According to one resource, 70% of people experience imposter syndrome. And a lot of that is not necessarily serving you, as you could imagine, right? So how do we change this? How do we show up differently? Well, a good example I have is I had a client who literally told me that she never thought of herself as anything more than an individual contributor while she was at her job, working there for 5+ years at a large bank. One day, a VP who was walking out the door happened to mention, I think you're smart enough to be a vice president here. To me, this story really sums up imposter syndrome. My client, Sarah, really literally was a little bit flabbergasted. She didn't not only expect that, but this set off a chain reaction in her thinking. She was an expert in her job. She knew she was great at what she did at the company. And the thought of taking over new responsibilities really didn't occur to her because it scared her, right? So this was what we're talking about, imposter syndrome, thinking, even though you're doing really great work, it's not meant for you to excel, or that you're really not doing that great of a job as you think you are, or as other people are saying. So for example, some of those thoughts you could be thinking are, what if you don't know that much? What if I don't know anything? What if I fail? What if that person was wrong? Maybe they don't know what they're talking about, right? So the more what ifs that we have, the harder it becomes to really convince ourselves that anything might be different. That is when imposter syndrome strikes hard, right? So what do we do differently? Well, the idea is that we have to think and act differently. We have to change our mindsets and behaviors. And that's where it gets challenging, because we're used to thinking in these ways, and they're stuck in patterns of usually decades of how we think about ourselves. And there's in this book from Dr. Valerie Young, The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women, she talks about these 5 competence types, and all of us fit into one of them, right? So I want to go through these. And again, this is work from Dr. Valerie Young. Her book is called The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women: Why Capable People Suffer from the Imposter Syndrome and How to Thrive in Spite of It. Maybe we'll have Dr. Valerie on the Pausecast if I can find her. Let me know if you have a connection, and we'll get her on here to talk about this herself. But essentially, these are the 5 archetypes. Okay, the first one, and as I say these, I want you to think about them. Does this relate to you? Are you this archetype? Because it doesn't mean you stay as an imposter, but now that you know and identify as one of them, you can start to shift your behavior because you'll know the culprit of how your thinking works. So the first one is the perfectionist. You can probably imagine that one. The second one is the superwoman or the superman, superperson. The third one is the natural genius. The fourth one is the soloist. And the fifth one is the expert. The perfectionist first. So let's talk about that, right? So if we're wanting to always dot the I's and cross the T's perfectly, maybe we're really trying to control everything. Maybe we don't like to delegate because we want to do everything ourselves because we could do it better than anybody, right? Do you feel like you have to be 100% perfect 100% of the time? I'm curious if any of you can relate to the perfectionist. I'm sure there's a few of us out there. I know I have some of those tendencies. And the key is to know that we all can be perfectly imperfect. It means taking mistakes in stride and letting them be a natural part of the process. The truth is, we'll never be perfect 100% of the time. That is an unrealistic expectation. And we can accept this. We can know that, you know what, I'm a human being and I'm perfectly imperfect. The second one, the superwoman, the superman, right? This is the one you think you can do it all. Okay, this is the one I identify with too, the most, by the way. So this is that phenomenon when we push ourselves to work the hardest and do the most work and stay up late and burn that midnight oil and the candle at both ends because we can do it. We know we can do it. And we've done it in the past and we can do it again. And we want to be the last ones to leave the office and the first ones in because we know we've got it all going down. If you feel like you're a workaholic and this is your pattern, maybe you use work to avoid other things in your life, right? Then this could be you. I know this was, like I said, for me, and I burned out of Google. For those of you who don't know my story, I thought it was if I worked harder, I showed up longer hours, I worked on the Sundays, I could do all these things, then I would be seen as the superhuman, the person who could do it all. And why would anything go wrong if I just worked hard? Well, totally didn't work out that way. Long story short, I burned out. I took a 3-month unpaid break and I realized it wasn't about working harder at all. It was actually being more about present and knowing, hey, I'm a human and I have a different way that I could be other than working all the time. And I started to explore other parts of my life that I had been avoiding, like feelings, like emotions, like relationships, right? So as you become more attuned to your own internal validation, we don't need work. We don't need successes to be a person in the world that matters. You matter no matter what. You're okay no matter what. And that's what I work with my clients on, because work is only so deep and it only lasts for so long. And one day it might not serve you in this way, especially if your adrenals are depleted or you're having chronic stress or your body is aching and just breaking in different parts as a result of pushing so hard, right? So we have to nurture our own inner confidence and learn how to create the internal locus of control, which is our own self-validation and our own self-validated intimacy, as Dr. Schnartz would tell us in his book, Passionate Marriage. And then we can ease our pedal off the gas, or we can ease we can ease our foot off the gas a little bit to know that we can handle other workloads that aren't just a whole push, pull ahead, more push than anything, I guess. Okay, so we covered the perfectionist, we covered the superwoman. So a third archetype of imposter syndrome is the natural genius. So what the heck does that mean, right? So this is the folks who maybe judge their competence based on ease and speed as opposed to their efforts. They get stuff done, but maybe if they take a long time to master it, they don't feel good. There might be shame or guilt, and they have their bar set so high because they are really good at what they do. But just like perfectionists, like that doesn't always serve us, right? It's just an unreasonable bar that we hold for ourselves. So we do a lot of self-judgment. We think of ourselves, if we're not good enough, we're not fast enough. We have ridiculous expectations. That's just not going to serve us. And if we don't get it right the first try, we're beating ourselves up. And if we're not doing something quickly or fast enough, we sound the alarms. We're like, I'm out of here. This isn't working. I quit. Maybe, right? So if this is you, maybe you're always going for those straight A's. You're going for the best time around the track. Maybe you're an athlete. Maybe you're doing everything in what it takes so that you keep holding on. You keep the wheels on. So how do we move past this one? So if this is you, if you're the natural genius, know that it takes a lifetime for skills and for learning things. And it's not always about getting things done the fastest and best way. Even the most confident people take support and know that there are mistakes and we can be messy. So rather than beating yourself up, then just don't necessarily run into trouble that way. But otherwise, you don't have to have high impossible standards for yourself because those are just going to run you dry, right? Deplete us again. Instead, we want to know that we can be much more productive and successful, knowing that we can take our time and we can set expectations and boundaries that might serve us. However, it's just not a reasonable choice. I think of just families and children who are expected to like do crazy stuff these days, right? Whether it's a music recital or ballet or any of these things that can be held with such high expectations. And the reality is those are really good, but that shouldn't be why we're rewarded. It should be about who we are as people. So if we grew up with that high expectation from our parents or, set a bar for ourselves, we learned it from somebody, and chances are it's still there unless we've done something actively to change it. So know you're a work in progress. That's my bottom line. Know you're a work in progress, and you can take your time doing things just like everybody else. Number 4, the 4th archetype is the soloist. You can probably guess what this one is, right? Knowing you got this, you don't need any help, you're good, right? It's independence. It's knowing that you can do whatever you need to do and that is proving your worth, right? So maybe you feel like you got to do things by yourself. You don't need anybody help. And if anyone asks, you're like, no, thanks, I got it. I'm good. Maybe if someone wants to step in, you just quietly tell them it's fine. Meanwhile, you might feel like you have a bazillion things to have to finish. Remember, there's no shame in asking for help when you need it. And that's what really the antidote is for the soloist, is to know that you don't have to go it alone. You don't have to be a solo act. And knowing that it can actually be more fun and sustainable when we have a coworker or a colleague joining us in something. But if we're just simply working on our own, it can be tough and unsustainable because we're creatures of literally social networks. We are born as humans who live and work in families, in tribes and communities and culture. And all of that is natural. It kind of comes to us. We're not lone wolves out there. And if you are a lone wolf, would you like some company? Come on back and see what could be done. That's what career coaching is all about. That's what learning how to get support is for, because it is a choice to belong. It's a choice to get support. And it just can mean so much more can happen for you as opposed to running yourself into the ground, thinking you're alone and on your own, because that is a mistaken belief that can run your life and literally ruin it. Whether it's relationships, your work, and feeling like an imposter. The 5th and final archetype is the expert. So this is the expert, the person who needs to know everything, and that it's an impossible cup to fill, that you will never know enough is the expectation there. So there is a innate fear in your belly all the time, knowing, oh my gosh, if they only knew that I know nothing. Being exposed, like feeling like they're going to lift that cover up any day. And no, I am completely blank when it comes to this topic. And I'm actually just like making it up as I go. Right. So maybe there's a ideal job you see and you decide, I'm not going to apply for it. I don't know enough. Women are constantly undercutting themselves in this way, I think, right? Maybe there's more trainings to do, more certifications. Oh my goodness, let's get another master's. I'm saying that because I have 2 masters and I did that, right? So we don't need a certification to be worthy, although maybe you want one for a job, but it is not to need another thing and to know that's an expert thing, right? So whatever's going on in your life, know that it's okay to loosen up the reins a little bit and that there's always more to learn. You're never going to know everything. And as my dad used to tell me, there's always someone smarter than you. That is something that I grew up with. And it really resonated because I think I didn't need to be the smartest person. And that was okay. But if no one had told me that, I probably would have thought I had to be the smartest person. Right? So just practice just-in-time learning. What do you need to know right now? Right? What do I need today? What's the next little thing that I need now to get this done? And trust in that process, right? Trust in what's happening. So what can you do differently? So here's a few suggestions. First of all, take stock of what your archetype is, because we're all going to identify with minimum of one of those most likely. Remember, everyone has imposter syndrome to some extent. Sometimes it's not a big deal and you don't have to worry about it. And other times we've totally accomplished it because we've done the work and we've allowed ourselves to move out of that space to get the support we need to know that we're all good. We don't need to feel like imposters. Life is hard enough as it is, right? So know what your archetype is and just know that, okay, cool. Like I got this part of myself who thinks I need to be a superhuman. Great. Now that I know that, I can change it. Now I can know where I want to go from here. So I'm actually just a human who has some superhuman tendencies, and I want to be known for being a human and knowing all is well. And I got this. Right. So one way to do this is to focus on the positive. And I work a lot with this to change our framework of our mindset. But when we allow these negative thoughts or imposter syndrome thoughts to kind of creep in, they just don't serve us anymore. So we got to catch it and we focus on the positive. So one great way to do this is to make a list of your accomplishments, make them visible for yourself. I have my clients create a vision and write it down on a sticky note or post it near them. But it can just be simply like, I ran a mile today. I walked outside. I got, whatever it is, I ate a healthy meal. When we write these down, it gives ourselves validation and we feel good. It reminds us that, hey, I matter and I have good things going on and this is good stuff, right? And be proud of these things. Allow yourself to foster an affection and a kindness towards yourself, right? It's so important to do so. As women, we forget that we can brag, we can have humble brags, we can validate ourselves where we just share something that's an accomplishment or a win for the day. And sometimes we think these are like huge, lofty things, and that is not it at all. To me, a win is something that you like of your day. Like that's it. Something that you want to share and that you celebrate for yourself, whether it's big or small. It might be that you had a glass of water because you were thirsty. I mean, it's that simple. Don't overthink this. These are things that step by step, when we hear them, you're going to start to think differently. And if you notice yourself in the judgment phase, right? Remember, you might be in that imposter syndrome already going like, oh, that doesn't count. That's so lame. What am I doing? Counting a glass of water. That's nothing. That's like anyone could have that. So right then and there, you catch yourself in the imposter syndrome loop. If you are in this pattern, man, you should just like, let me know ASAP. We'll have a talk. I can help you with this. And the idea is to know that you can matter because it's you. It doesn't matter how big or small the accomplishment is. And that's the whole point of getting out of imposter syndrome. Okay, so those are some thoughts that I have. I'm so excited to share this with you because I hear this term a lot. A lot of my clients have what they call imposter syndrome, but the reality is we all have imposter syndrome, like I said, and it's just a simple matter of doing some things a little bit differently to build up that base where you do feel safe, to know that you matter enough, that your empowering beliefs are driving the ship, and it's not these old outdated programs that are been running your unconscious or subconscious programming for the last 30 years. We don't need that. It's time to change because the world needs you, and the world needs you to show up in a way where you feel good and that you can shine your light, because we need your light. There are others who need your light, whether it's your significant other or your pet or your neighbor or your partner or your kid or your sister or just you. You need your light, right? We are all in it together in our own way. So thank you so much. And if this resonates with you, you want to learn more about this, I'm so here for you. And just know I got your front, your back, and your sides. And you can let me know. Just message me, or you can easily book a call with me. You can go to my website, rachelomera.com, and schedule a call. Just click on the contact me button, or you can schedule a call under the coaching link. It's right there and complimentary, because I just don't think it's okay for women to feel like this anymore. Let's change the game. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. And I am excited for you to pick up the book from Dr. Young. She also has a TEDx talk about how to not think like an imposter. But yes, she's got this great book. I'm so glad we were talking about it today. And learn and to be with your archetype, and know that you don't have to stay there. The type can shift, and we can intentionally shift our behavior in service to becoming who you were meant to become and shining your light. Life is too short to do anything else. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.